pigeon pose is one of those poses that you either hate it or you love it, or depending on the day, you could hate it and the next day you could love it. I think it's the best pose possible for helping relieve sciatic pain and back pain. And if I haven't done one in a few days, I can definitely feel the effects. So we're gonna break down pigeon pose from like the very tippy top and all of the adjustments you can make to make it really comfortable for you. I know that's something that people struggle with. So let's get started. We're gonna start and we're gonna come into it from tabletop. I think this is a lot more accessible than coming into it from downward facing dog, which is what you'll see a lot. So come into your tabletop, and then we're just gonna bring our left knee forward to this top left corner of the mat. Now from here, I'm gonna sit off to the side, okay? And then I'm gonna start to move and walk and wiggle my foot up as far as it is willing to go, which isn't very far, okay? And then I'm gonna roll this right hip point back down. Now, take a look back. You can see my ankle and my foot are really crooked, so I'm going to straighten all that out. Toes are going to be behind my ankle, and my ankle is going to be behind my knee, and then my knee is going to be right behind my hip. From here, I'm going to turn back to the front of the mat, okay? Now, the left hip, because my left knee is forward, I'm going to want to hug my left hip back ever so slightly. And then this right hip bone, I'm gonna roll my right hip bone forward ever so slightly, okay? I take a look back and make sure my leg is straight. And now from here, people are like, okay, well, you know, I'm barely in this pose and everything's screaming. Blocks are your friend, okay? You wanna maintain as much length and lift in your spine as possible in pigeon, which you're like, okay, it's a hip opener. Why does it matter what's going on in my spine? Yes, it's a hip opener, but it's also a bit of a back bend. And the safest way to go into a back bend is to always have your shoulders rolled down and your heart lifted. So starting out with hands on blocks, to me, is a very useful way to figure out how this pose is actually supposed to feel in your body before you worry about getting your forehead anywhere close to the ground. So the left hip is tucking back, right hip is tucking forward. By the way, my name is Shari. I make videos about yoga and all the ways that you can take care of yourself and live with intention. So from here, what's nice to think about also is that your left hip doesn't have to touch the ground. I feel like people get really caught up in that and they're like, oh, you know, I want my front of my leg needs to be at the front of the mat and my hip has to be touching the ground. I need to be like flat on the floor. So not necessary. My left hip is sinking down towards the ground, but it's not touching, and that's all that really matters. Now from here you can adjust and you can lower blocks and really start to sink even deeper into this pose. And then the beauty of having yoga blocks, I really recommend if you're serious about wanting to enjoy your yoga practice and not have it feel like torturous at all times, invest the $10 so you can get them on Amazon. I'll link some below, okay? From here, you can come onto your forearms, and I can have one forearm on each block. So you want them to be about shoulder width apart. And now I can feel that left hip sinking even lower, even more deeply to the ground. Now over time, maybe you find that, you know, you need more, in which case you would get those blocks out of the way and come down onto your forearms. And then over time, as that left hip is sinking more and more and more, maybe you make this little forehead stack of your fists and you can kind of relax your forehead there, or bring this block right here and rest the forehead. So that's the purpose of these yoga blocks, is to support your body and bring the floor closer to you as you get more and more comfortable with poses, and allow you to feel the pose more deeply without necessarily needing to go all the way into the pose, if that makes sense. Beautiful. So let's come on up and out. Let's work on the other side so you can actually see what my hip is doing. And I'm just going to come to tabletop and I'm going to shake out my left leg because it is tender. It will be tender. You just have like all your body weight on your left leg. So be kind to yourself, moan and groan as much as you need to. Let's shake it out. Cool. And then let's go on over to the other side. So coming through tabletop, I pretty much always come through tabletop, and I'm just gonna bring my right knee forward. I'm gonna sit off onto my right hip because this is, for me, I found the easiest. I'm gonna wriggle my right foot forward as much as it wants to go, and then I'm gonna come back through onto that right knee. I'm gonna look back, I'm gonna straighten everything out. I'm gonna line it up. I'm gonna line up my foot and my ankle on my knee and my hip, and I'm gonna turn back forward, widen my right knee out again, and then I'm gonna start to let my right hip start to settle and sink down. I'm immediately gonna grab my blocks, and I'm actually gonna put them on the second level. I don't know if you guys know that, but this is level 1, level 2, level 3. So I'm going second level on my yoga blocks, and I'm gonna start to hug my right hip back and start to let my left hip roll forward. And then I'm gonna look back and re-straighten my leg because it does tend to get a little out of joint when you make that adjustment. Beautiful. I'm gonna roll my shoulders back, lift my heart, big inhale. Exhale, I'm gonna mentally and physically sink this right hip down. Woo, that's a big stretch. So you can see here, I've got a good 2 inches between my hip and the ground. If your hip is really high off the ground and you have a blanket or a pillow or even another block, you can take that bad boy and you can put it underneath your hip. This feels really good for some people, and I would recommend making sure you have a really soft, squishy block. Like this is a pretty firm block, this is a pretty soft block. So I would take like a soft block with rounded edges and prop it under the hip, or a towel, a pillow, or a blanket is actually even nicer. Now from here, I'm gonna start to settle and sink lower. Something else to keep in mind is that you can go through all of these versions all at once. Like some days I can get right down onto my forearms if it's later in the day and I've been moving around a lot, but if it's earlier in the morning, no shot. I have to start out either high up on my hands or on blocks, and that's why I keep them close by, is so that I don't ever feel the need to push my body any further than it needs to or wants to go in that moment. Over time, as things sink and settle, maybe you come down onto those forearms. And then if you're a person with more open hips, you would start to wriggle your foot forward, 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 until maybe your shin does line up with the front of the mat. I might never get there in this lifetime. I'm totally cool with that. All I care about is that the posture is effective and that my form is not going to injure me. So gazing forward, long neck. Beautiful. Let's come on up onto those hands and gently slide this right foot back. Shake it out. Ooh. Take your time. You can kind of rock back and forth. So that is pigeon pose, and all of the different heights and variations and adjustments you can make to your pigeon pose. I definitely suggest taking your time with it. And thank you for hanging out with me in this little chatty video while we kind of work through and figure it out. I hope you had some like light bulb moments in your body, and if you did, please let me know. I know that when I got to a point where like pigeon pose made sense to me, it was just like the best feeling in the world, because now I know that I can take care of my sciatic pain. I haven't had any sciatic pain once I regularly started incorporating pigeon pose into my yoga practice. It's really wonderful for low back pain as well, or if you sit a lot. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this style of video. Please let me know if there are any other poses you want me to break down more, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.